Welcome to a session where I'm joined by Sophie, where we're discussing President Trump's tariffs and what retailers should be preparing for. Sophie has got a bag of experience from working as the head of outbound for Matches Fashion, the head of transport managing inbound and outbound for Urban Outfitters, as well as being on the dark side working for both carriers and forwarders. So pleasure to have you with us, Sophie.
Hey Sam, great to be here. What a whirlwind it's been. So much change, and we're going to try and pick through how retailers get ahead versus being left behind.
Nice. So we have been spending a lot of time with retailers over the last 10 days. Things have unfolding. It's pretty continuous rather than one specific thing. Can you just give us a quick whistle-stop tour of what's happened, what's come out, and potentially what's to come?
So kind of from the start of Feb, on the 4th, a big announcement was released that there was additional 10% duty being imposed on all goods originating from China being imported into the US. That is 10% in addition to the duty rates that are already payable upon import. At the same time as that announcement, Trump also said that the de minimis rule for China goods that were being imported within shipments that were below the $800 threshold, that they wouldn't be eligible for kind of that relief anymore. That was quickly reverted kind of later in the week. So by Friday, that change had been suspended. Supposedly, there were reports of like millions of parcels queuing up at the US border. There were informal entries could no longer be used to get those shipments into market. The strain on CBP kind of increased tenfold overnight. So there's been a bit of back and forth in that space, but the additional 10% remains. The de minimis rule has been suspended temporarily. On top of that, there's been changes that have been kind of discussed and publicised with regards to goods from Canada and Mexico. Additional 25% duty was announced to be imposed. That was then pushed out. So that's expected to come into play in March, but watch this space. We don't quite know what's going to happen there. And then just yesterday, kind of Japan and China are making noise about the changes that Trump has made. So they're not best pleased with regards to how he's going to treat their goods. China have imposed kind of additional duty rates between 10 and 15% on $14 billion worth of US goods, and they're primarily in the fuel and farm equipment sectors. The other kind of the hot thing right now is that EU goods, like either today or tomorrow, we're expecting further announcements that increased duty rates will be seen on the import of EU goods into the market.
So a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks. And I think at the start, lots of retailers were thinking, well, I'm not in the US, probably doesn't matter to me. But the things that you discussed around different countries potentially being impacted of tariffs, the way goods are routed, the de minimis changes. If you was a UK or a European retailer right now, what would you be thinking about?
I would focus on data and visibility, understanding your flows in and out of the US, know what inventory you've got at various stages along the supply chain. From that, you can drive duty cost models, landed cost reporting. You can understand potential risks around kind of US intake, and if we see further instability in the wider market based on everything that's going on, how that might affect customer promise, etc., etc.
And in terms of building out that reporting suite with your forwarder or just internally, what's the kind of key data elements that you would need in order to kind of simulate that impact?
So I'd try and make it relevant to your business. So I'd do it at a SKU level as opposed to a PO level or a container level, just so that it resonates with stakeholders and kind of your wider organization in the best possible way. You'll need country of origin data, you will need accurate commodity codes, customs valuation or the cost price on the invoice that you're going to use to import into final destination, so the US. From that, you can start building out the expected duty impact and kind of layer on where we're seeing these changes, like the additional 10% for imports from China. How does that kind of go across my inventory, and how does that pivot around key dates, etc.
And then from an operational perspective, what would be the kind of capabilities or things that would need to change to manage in this new environment?
I would focus on understanding what levers you have both internally and externally, and how quickly you can leverage those changes. So you might need to divert product, you might need to slow product down, you might want to speed it up, you might want to, hold it. how can you work in partnership with your factories, your freight forwarders, the shipping lines, your hauliers, etc., to do all of that? How do you make sure that your asks are prioritized? How do you make sure that you're giving adequate notice? How do you know what is achievable so that you're not over-promising and under-delivering, right? You don't want to kind of tell the business, oh, no worries, we can divert all of our product that was going to hit the US, we can send that to the EU, when actually it might have passed the point of no return. So kind of stay on the front foot, ask the right questions, understand, the levers that can be pulled and when they can be actioned.
And we've spoke a bit, the update in terms of Trump's tariffs impact both inbound goods into the US from China, but also if you're shipping to the US from the UK, Europe, potentially with the de minimis. What would you be doing from a customer perspective or with your key suppliers in the supply chain to make sure that you can manage these changes both on inbound and outbound?
I would look up and down the supply chain. So China remains kind of a core supplier hub, right? So you're not alone in this, but likely your manufacturing partners are going to be their customers, of which you are probably one of, are all going to be facing the same thing. So talk openly, understand what's possible, understand kind of your relevant production milestones, what can be influenced, what can't. If you can renegotiate, obviously do. Understand your contracts, what it may be possible. I would kind of, depending on how broad you want to go, you also need to look at kind of how you're selling in market, your presence in market. If you're fulfilling e-com from, say, the Netherlands, and the majority of your shipments have fallen under the de minimis before, and you've got a mix of China product in there, you might want to stop offering China product to your US customers. You may need to increase the retail price on those items. You might need to think around the comms that support that. You might need to look at your returns flow and whether it's worth bringing e-com returns kind of out of the US to then send them back again. You also might want to look at kind of, previously you may have thought, oh, I might be able to move it to, say, Mexico, South America or Canada. Appreciate what might be coming down the line and how that might influence your strategy. I think trying to solve everything now probably isn't the right approach because it's such a moving situation, and per reports and per the news and per everything that Trump has kind of referenced when he speaks, this is not it. There is more to come. So setting a strategy based on what has already been implemented will probably not solve everything that's hitting the business right now.
And there's been some big things in the news. So we see ASOS announced about shutting their North American facility.
Yeah.
I think we see some changes with the way that Next and Superdry are going to fulfill in the US.
Yeah.
At Zencargo, one of the big things for us is how we make our customers' supply chain a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
If we flip the script now, how could retailers start using this disruption, all of these different changes in policies to their advantage to maybe speed to market, improve efficiency, outmaneuver the competition? What are the areas or the levers that they've got to pull?
I think it's understanding, to the point around kind of understand your options, which I referenced earlier, understand what you can do quickly, what's going to have maximum impact on your bottom line, and then drive the business to prioritize that together. So if you want to try and sell through China product into the US market before the de minimis change is reinstated, how do you get trade and kind of wider cohorts within your business to all get behind that? Is that a very quick promo strategy? Is that trying to unlock more partnerships in market to kind of really push your brand? Is it that you are, I don't know, doing a bit of a last chance message that's trying to turn this, rather than a future risk, as something that you can maximize in the next, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, month? I think it's a chance to really understand capability of your partners, right? And ask, really push them to help your business navigate this in the best way possible. So they are likely moving your goods. They are the experts in terms of the art of the possible within the transportation network. So what can they do? Encourage them to be innovative, encourage them to say, actually, we need to stop everything that's on the water, that's on the way to the US, that's going to land after the 7th of March. We want to stop that in its tracks. We need to, where can we send it? How can we do that at its lowest cost? What are our options? Make them work hard for you, for your business. We are actively having those conversations with our customers right now. We're understanding kind of how they raise their purchase orders, their forward commitment, what they've got in the pipeline, what that might mean for their presence in the US market, and actively talking to them about how we minimize the impact in this space.
Some of it is as well as there's not anything needs to happen different, right? They're purchasing from China, they're selling to the US, they've got demand there, they're going to continue to fulfill their orders there. But being able to communicate to the business the impact on the margin, potentially changing marketing strategies depending on these different things is key.
Yeah, and it might be that you do need to increase your retail prices slightly, but there's a message behind that. And if you own the comms and if you get ahead of that, and if you're transparent and proactive and keep that in line with the feel and the culture of your brand, that customers get it, because it is in the news, it is everywhere. No one exists on an island, right? Everybody is exposed to this stuff. I think also enable your internal teams. So any customer facing teams, be that customer care or your retail staff or whatever that looks like for you as a business, bring them up to speed, get them so that they're kind of aware of what this means and can talk to customers in the right way with the right tone and the language that you kind of want to share. It doesn't mean that you should stop trading in the US. It might just mean that you have to reshape what you're doing a bit.
And I suppose you've got good insights on this from Urban Days, but in terms of UK and European retailers, we don't typically see that they have a sourcing strategy of sourcing domestically in the US. Do you think that given the tariffs, given that there's a heavy reliance on China, that there's an opportunity for UK and European retailers to start sourcing and manufacturing directly in the US to fulfill the US market?
Possibly. Kind of within the two retailers that kind of I worked in across the last 7 years, we saw pockets of it. So some product coming out of LA, some beauty coming out of the US. There's definitely capability there. Is it widespread? I definitely need to do more research on that. So there are some options. Is it a like for like with China? I probably not. Can you get everything that you would currently get from China from the US? Not without some work. I think that's probably would need to be more of a medium longer term focus, and would also be linked to how far are you into your US strategy? If that is a really key market for you and you have a really strong presence there and you are profitable and you've got an established customer and you've got big growth aspirations and you don't want to let that go, then that repivot strategy might look different to say you're testing, right? And you've done a few shipments and you've sent a bit of product in and you're just trying to get a sense of what's going on.
In terms of the here and now, if you was a retailer, how would you structure moving forward, maybe not next 60 days, but now, next, later, in terms of what to be focusing on?
I would, same point, data visibility reporting, make sure that's all lined up. Internal comms plan. So how are you going to let everybody know what's going on? I would look at any high impact actions that need to be leveraged ASAP. So those top-down directives that are non-negotiable. Then I would look at supplier or kind of partnership negotiations. So can you reduce your cost price? Do you have to address wholesale agreements, etc.? I would look at enabling internal teams. So making sure that kind of everybody that's representing the business knows the angle, what they need to be sharing with customers. I would be looking at alternative sourcing strategies, working really closely with your buying and merch teams just on any enablement that they need if they've got to kind of change their direction of travel. And then longer term, keep your pulse on what the market's doing, where competitors are going, what your offering in market looks like, how that fares versus others. What do you need to do to evolve, keep up, adapt? I would look at pricing strategies. So how are you kind of protecting margin in whatever way you can? And finally, I would just look at your fiscal setup. So that is everything from US entity, importer from overseas, tax obligations, transfer pricing agreements, your customs valuation, etc.
Nice. That's a great plan, now, next, later. And it's probably now more than ever a period where you're going to be relying on your partners who are subject matter experts in their different domains. Is there any advice you'd give around that piece of how to engage with your forwarder, your carrier, if it's potentially UK, US parcel shipments? Is there any advice you'd give there?
I make sure you've got options, right? I think there's a lot of outsourcing and there's lots of points along the supply chain where things can and do go wrong. We've already seen that kind of the changes that have been tried to impose or that have been imposed have then been revoked because there's been like goods queuing up at the border, etc. So you want to have contingency. I think leverage your partners to help you understand what's going on. They should be closest to these changes. It's kind of some of the information that's being released to like US brokers directly has the ins and outs of what all of this change means. So to really understand kind of what you have to do and how you need to adapt and how you remain compliant, you make sure that you're positioned with people that are connected in the right way, have the right presence in market, representation in market. I think all of that is really important. I also think there's a bit of healthy challenge that can be put out there. So make your partners work hard on your behalf to try and protect your business, mitigate impact, be that delays, be that cost, be that like protecting your end customer. I think it's like that's what they're here for, right? You're trying to unlock their capability because they do things that you within your business are not trying to do. So work with them, make sure that you're in with people whom really care, that you have a partnership with, and that you can kind of really try and solve this together, as opposed to feeling like you're on the back foot and don't really know where to turn.
Nice. So then to wrap up, final two pieces of wisdom from you, Sophie. What would be your advice for anyone who is listening to this episode and thinking, Christ, I've got a lot to do? What would you give them?
Sort your data out. I think visibility, reporting, that you can pivot at the right level and inform everybody appropriately in the right way, I think is critical and will help you have a feeling that at least you're remaining current and like up to speed with everything that's changing, because it's likely that the view that you pulled yesterday might need to look different tomorrow. So how do you enable yourself to kind of adapt with the changes? There may be big things that your business has to do to kind of protect itself, but don't try and plan too far ahead today, because it is evolving, it is changing. We're not done. As we've seen, things are announced, they're then revoked. It's a moving beast. So yeah, there isn't a playbook or a solution or a way to suddenly serve the US market that is right. It's going to need thought and discussion and discovery, and there's so many inputs that you've got to work through to try and figure out what's right for your business and your customer.
We've been spending a lot of time over the last couple of weeks speaking with all of our kind of existing customers to help them with workshopping, and a lot of the pieces that Sophie touched on in terms of how we can help them communicate the impact to the business and potentially mitigate some of those challenges or come up with creative solutions. So if there's anything that we've discussed or covered that you want to reach out on, then feel free to kind of come directly to me or Sophie. I hope you enjoyed the session.